Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF Everything in That Shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF Everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody. It's me, Daniel from Spoiled Rotten, and I've got a very special guest today. Courtney Small, you are a Rotten Tomato certified critic. You founded CinemaAccess.com. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff here. You've contributed to In the Seats, That Shelf, Leonard Maltin. So you're very accomplished. We're going to be talking about something really fun, and I'm probably going to be out of my element here, but I definitely wanted to be able to have you on the podcast and talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me on. I don't know how accomplished I am, but you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly look forward to reading your stuff and hearing your thoughts on stuff. I think the big thing when I heard your thoughts on it for me was the farewell. I was like, man, yeah, I feel the same way, and I like the way you kind of dismantled it. I heard you on another podcast, and I kind of just continued to like catch up on your writing and anywhere you were talking about film.
Yeah, that was the Matinee Cast, and that's a great film for if any of your listeners haven't seen it. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. So
It is, yeah. I forced my wife Pauline to watch it, and she loved it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I had my fingers crossed. I was like, please like it, please like it. But yeah, today we are going to be talking about the Fast and Furious franchise. I don't even remember when Fast and Furious 9 was supposed to come out, but I feel like it was around this time, so I guess it's a good enough time to kind of bring it back up.
Yeah, I feel like it was coming out in
May,
maybe.
So the funny thing is, the last episode I recorded with my co-host Ben, he got his tickets for Fast and Furious 9 that like right after we recorded, and it was kind of like, oh, that seems early. And then obviously this happened, the pandemic happened, and I don't know what it's coming up next May now. They've pushed it back a year.
Yeah, they definitely pushed it back a year. I guess it was the wise thing to do. These are the type of films that you can still enjoy at home, but I
100%.
found, yeah, it's a kind of a theater with a crowd type of experience.
Yeah, I love going to see the movies in theater. I think I skipped some in the middle. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I saw the first two in theater, and then 5 through 8 in theater, including Hobbs and Shaw. So I worked with some people that like they didn't really care about film. All they cared about was Fast and Furious films, though. Like even to the point where I was like, yeah, like this last one didn't really have any races. Like, don't spoil anything. Do not, like, because they really lived for like the racing in particular.
Oh, okay.
And it was a big deal to them. They would all go to the theater in their cool cars and park a very specific way to kind of show off as well. And it was like their enthusiasm kind of won me over to like being like, all right, like I really like these guys. They really like these movies. I'm going to go in fresh with this, like once 5 happened, because that was when they brought The Rock in. And I was kind of like, all right, like let me go back and see like what the deal is with these movies. And I just was like, yeah, I love it. This is really fun stuff.
It's funny because I'm not a car guy at all. Like I can't tell you half of the cars that are in these films, and I've watched them countless times.
I'm the same. I do not know about cars.
But I do just enjoy the sheer insanity of it all, I guess the soap opera drama of it. And it's funny because I've been showing my 8-year-old son the series, but I've been showing them in order of, I guess, the retrofit order.
Right. I was gonna say, I feel like not early on, but like once the like movies came back to Han, I mean in the the chronological order. It was kind of like, oh, this goes after this and before that. And that is kind of one of the first things I want to talk about. Like, what is the order? Is it 1, 2, like 5, 6, 7, 8 Tokyo Drift?
No. So are we talking the new quote unquote order that we're supposed to believe all this happens in, and not
Yes.
how they were actually made?
Yeah, not how they were actually made. The one you're supposed to like piece together from how the films work.
Okay, so eliminate 3, and it goes 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Then put in 3. So 3 comes
Wow.
after 6.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes.
And then 7 and 8. And it's funny because, as I said, I've been showing my son it, and probably not the best thing to show an 8-year-old, but whatever. He enjoys it. We have a routine that before every film, I say, remember, the language. I don't want to hear you saying it.
Mm-hmm.
The fight scenes and stuff, I don't want to see you practice it on your little sister or no one at school. I do the parental thing at the beginning.
Good.
And then we just have at it. But I was trying to explain the order, and he just kept giving me this puzzled look. And I tried my best to break it down. I was like, well, you see, they didn't intend for this. And then this director came in, and he just glossed over. So I'm like, don't worry about it. So with him, we just finished 7 last night.
What did he think?
Oh, he loves them so far, and he's actually at this point he's getting better at remembering when certain things happen.
Okay, good.
So I'll say, you remember when so and so? He's like, yeah, that happened in number 2, or this.
Wow.
And I think he had seen parts of 7 before. Like I think I'd shown him some of the just outlandish action sequences. So by the time we hit 7, he remembered a lot from that film.
Nice. I like that. Okay. We are going to go from, I don't like saying worst to best anymore, this least favorite to favorite. But ahead of time, just know that kind of my bias leans towards when they kind of become more about heists and less about the actual racing.
Okay.
Just letting you know. So, like, I feel like that's going to be obvious once I start saying what my list is. Did you want to go first?
Sure. So the one I put at the bottom is Too Fast, Too Furious.
Perfect. We have the same bottom one.
The caveat I put for that, though, it's one of my, I think, top 5 cinematic experiences that I've ever had.
Like going to the theater, this was one of your favorites?
I saw this film in Barbados at one of the older theaters they have. I guess now in Barbados they've got like a much classier theater, and then kind of like an old school type theater. And it was one where it was I think it was like opening weekend, or maybe not opening weekend, but definitely in the summer when it came out. And it was a very interactive crowd. Like they were singing along with the background music. When Tyrese takes off his shirt, the women are hooting and hollering. It made a otherwise kind of bland retread so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of cemented my love for these type of films, just because it was such a wonderful time at the movies. The reason I put it at the bottom, story-wise, I don't find the villain that interesting. I found that they tried to basically recapture the magic of the first film, and I mean the addition of Roman is nice, but I think it was missing something. Like the humor didn't quite land. Even the racing, I didn't find that thrilling. The opening scene is probably the best part when they have that epic chase with the bridge. But I don't know. I thought a lot of characters were wasted. Tej is just kind of like the mechanic who would never race, and then they never address that again.
Is right, because that's the Ludacris character. That's his first one, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it's Tyrese's first and Ludacris's first. I feel like, and this is the one with Eva Mendes as well, right?
Yeah, and she's a character that I thought they would bring back more, because we see her at
She's
the end
one more
of
time.
5. Yeah.
And I was like, right, okay, we're bringing it back. But anyway, so this is also my least favorite. I mean, it is worth mentioning. This is the John Singleton one, which is something I also like about these movies, is that they're, except for the first movie, all people of color directing, which so that's just kind of like a nice touch to these films. And I think that also speaks to, at one point, I think Five was outperforming movies that had like that were in IMAX and in 3D. And it was just like, yeah, because everyone gets to see themselves on screen in these movies. Maybe not in the best way for women, but like still a bit more inclusive, and that's even behind the camera, which I like. But yeah, number two, everything you said about the just kind of retread, and I was in the theater as well, and I was just like, this isn't hitting for me. This is just something feels off. But the one thing that does stick out for me, and I'm hoping it's this one, is that there's the torture scene with like where there's like a rat under a bucket, and they're kind of like, you got to give us the information before the rat chews through you. And I was like,
Yes.
this is interesting to me. Like I'm engaged now. I'm very uncomfortable engaged. But other than that, I feel like the movie was kind of like, oh well, all right, whatever. Other than, like you said, people cheering when Tyrese took his shirt off.
Yeah, it's funny because that rat scene is the only time in the Fast and the Furious film where I've actually kind of like censored something for my son, so he didn't actually see that part.
I could see, yeah, because I think even I was like, wow, this is really intense. Like it felt different from everything else in the movie, and I could see that being a bit much for younger people.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, one of the things I questioned about whether showing him is the portrayal of women, because especially earlier on, most of the women who aren't like actual characters are just gratuitous scenery.
Yep.
But one of the things I like, to your point about the diversity, this series has always been great about showcasing diversity in such a natural way.
Yes.
They could be heroes, they could be villains, what have you, but it's just, they just casted people that, you know, would fit. So the crew is always diverse. But then also, especially as the series moves on, the women I found had a lot of their own agency. And some of my favorite films in the franchise are the ones where the women have like a lot to do.
Right. Yes, I agree that it's kind of, it gets a little bit iffy. Like, so for this episode, I have to rewatch, or not rewatch, I had to watch Tokyo Drift for the first time. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is what they were like before. There was always that shot of like the women like walking by the cars, just focusing kind of like on their bottom and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, I mean, they're not that enlightened, but like I felt like they did a good job of getting past that in later films.
Yeah, I would say though that number 7, and we can discuss it more when we get to it. I found number 7 was kind of trying to keep that type of thing alive, but it was a different director at that point. So,
right, that's where James Wan took over, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is, I guess that would have been number 9 on the list if we're number 8. What's your number 8?
My number 8 is Fast and Furious. This is technically number 4 in the series, the second Justin Lin film. And I will say that I'm a big fan of Justin Lin. Like I followed him since he first had Better Luck Tomorrow back at the Toronto International Film Festival. But of the 4 films that he's done in this franchise, I think 3 are great. And I think he is the reason why this franchise is kind of reached the heights that it has globally. But for this particular film, number 4, I felt like it doesn't quite have its own distinct voice like some of the other ones do.
I definitely think it's kind of like building up to something, but it's not necessarily its own movie.
Yeah.
I feel like, because I mean, not that there was that many movies off, but after 2, I kind of stopped watching. So I didn't watch Tokyo Drift. I didn't watch Fast and Furious. But the trailers for 5, and as I said, the people I work with kind of made me be like, all right, I'm going to go back. And I was like, I could probably skip Tokyo Drift. Little did I know it's kind of, most stuff is kind of hinged on that. Well, so I was like, I'll watch Fast and Furious number 4. And I was like, yeah, this is like better, but also it doesn't seem like I would watch this on its own and feel satisfied.
Yeah, it's a film that definitely, I guess, plots out the blueprint for how elaborate the franchise is going to go. Like I felt like Justin Lin in his first two films did a lot with pretty much next to nothing for a budget. So this one was a bit more of a budget because you're bringing back the gang, the original gang,
Right.
for quote unquote one last time. But you got the sense that he always saw it as something bigger. With this one, you've got the great opening. Like you have I guess the best way to say is the laws of physics being thrown out the window. It officially
Yeah.
gets thrown out the window with this one, but the whole story of Letty dying, which I think is fine. Like I like that this franchise wasn't afraid to kill off characters, at least initially.
Right.
But bringing Toretto and Brian back together to figure out who killed Letty is interesting to a point. But when they start dealing with Braga and who is Braga, and then you realize that most of the epic action sequences are in this kind of like CGI tunnel underneath the Mexican border, it's not that interesting. Even how it ends, I feel everything is so anticlimactic. Like this from a story standpoint, it doesn't quite hold up for me.
Yeah, I basically disagree with everything because it's weird that it's not like my number 8. It's just kind of like, for me, one of the more forgettable ones, other than knowing that it's setting up Letty's death and kind of bringing people back together. But even as I watched it, it was kind of like, this is so that I can watch 5, and I feel like that's just how it plays out. Like it's an in between piece, to kind of bridge from what was going on in Tokyo Drift to getting to where 5 and beyond goes.
So what was your number 8 then?
And people are just going to be angry. It's the first Fast and Furious movie.
Interesting. Okay.
I think this is where my bias comes in, is like, I don't really care about the drag racing and all of that. So for me, it's kind of like not the strongest acting in this series, or like for me at least, my memory, because I think this is one I've watched multiple times because I got it as a Christmas gift as well as seeing it in theaters. And so it was kind of like, I've watched them a bunch of times, and I feel like there's always moments that I get upset at, like Paul Walker's performance. And I'm just kind of like, I don't like these guys. It's got good moments. But there's just something about it. Maybe I should rewatch it now that I've seen everything and I kind of get where they're going with it and respect it on that level. But it's kind of just, for me, what the old movies were that I wasn't that invested in, and which is why it's as low as it is. I mean, obviously people love this movie, and I don't like to yuck people's yum, as I've heard usually. Like, so I'm not here to be like, oh, this is terrible. It's just, it doesn't work for me as much as the other stuff.
Okay, that's fair. I would say more on that, but I have it ranked a little higher. So,
so yeah, that's our number 8. What's your number 7?
Number 7 for me is The Fate of the Furious, aka number 8 in the series, and this is when F. Gary Gray takes over as director. I felt like this one, and to show my hand a bit, the next film I'm going to mention are films where you really realize the importance of Paul Walker. And this was something I forgot to mention even in number 2. I find that outside of Justin Lin, that Paul Walker for me was a key figure in this franchise, because even though it has gone back to being Vin Diesel's franchise, Toretto is not as interesting without someone to counterbalance him. And for number 8, it's the first official one without Paul Walker, and they bring in like little nobody who they can't quite figure out, is he going to be like the next Paul Walker, or the kind of yin to Toretto's tough guy Yang. There's a lot of weird story aspects. I also found the women don't get a lot to do. Michelle Rodriguez, Letty, her character, and Ramsey, I felt like they were more kind of pushed to the sideline. And this
Yeah.
franchise always works better when the women are far more integral players. And I know there was a lot of behind the scenes tension between The Rock and like Tyrese and Diesel and all that for,
Which
spin-offs.
I honestly thought was a joke, and then I'm like, oh, they're serious about this, or at least they're committing to this for some kind of long play. I just thought like when the movie came out, it would be like, yeah, we were just doing that to build up hype. But it's like, no, it's still going.
It's funny because I like the character of Roman as a joker or what have you, but in real life, I'm like, Tyrese, you need to stay quiet, especially because I'm a fan of Dwayne Johnson. I constantly refer to him as like the modern MVP of cinema because you can put him in anything and he'll at least make it watchable.
Yeah,
you could watch Skyscraper and go, it wasn't that bad because he made it entertaining, right? Whereas another actor would have just been like, oh, this thing is horrible. He's saved countless franchises.
I mean, because especially when 5 hits, that was Fast and Furious and G.I. Joe that he kind of gave a boost when he joined.
Yeah,
and I think I haven't seen everything he's done, but like I've seen most of it, and he's always trying. Like that's like what I kind of like, that he's committing to the material. He's not not necessarily phoning it in. He's like you believe he's in that world, and so that's good. But yeah, specifically for Fate, there wasn't a lot for the women to do, and I know that's the point, but like the way Charlize Theron's character named Cyber,
Cypher, I think.
Cypher.
Yeah.
Like when she ends up killing like the mother of Dom's baby, I forget. I know she's in 5 and 6, but I don't remember her name right now. But like I was like, oh, like they're really gonna kill her? Oh, that's too bad. Like I know it's convenient for the story, but like it was nice having so many female characters. And that was a nice character to kind of go back to, I felt like. But yeah, for me, what I liked about the movie, or I guess I should keep that for when I get to it.
Okay, it's because you have it slightly higher up.
Yeah, some might say too high. But
okay, well, you know what? I will just say as my last thing in terms of one of the reasons I don't like it is I do like Charlize, but I feel the whole how they treat both Shaws, kind of irked me, and we can get into that a bit more when we talk about the film. And also I found like it was almost too over the top CGI heavy, and I'm referring mostly to like the flying remote control cars scene,
right, when they have like the zombie cars, quote unquote, in New York.
Yeah, and then the notion that Toretto is such a tough guy, such a badass that it takes a whole team plus a few extra people to try and take him down. And I've never thought of him as being as great as some of these films try to make him out to be.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that. I do feel bad that it's so high up, but it is what it is. So yeah, my 7 would be Fast and Furious, like number 4. It's as I said, it's kind of bridging that gap. So like, while I don't think it's that strong of a film on its own, I do see it as kind of like ushering in the new wave of how the films will work. And I'll speak more to that later. But yeah, it's kind of, there's a very specific thing I like about the new way they work, which I'll spend time on and when I get to it.
Okay, and I do like that, this one, it does introduce us to Giselle, who, again, she becomes far more prominent in the other films, which I like that Lynn brought her back. We get a bit of Han.
Yep.
Early on, just a small bit of Han, but there's parts to it that I do like. It's just,
which I should say, Han might be like my favorite character. So there's that.
I have no problem saying he is my favorite.
Okay.
I love Han. Every time I see him eating a bag of salty chips, or just how cool he is in certain situations, but I'll get to that a bit later.
Okay. Number 6.
So for me, number 6 is actually Furious 7, the
Okay.
7th one in the series. And part of it is because I understand with the death of Paul Walker, they had to rewrite and reshoot some of this film. So it's a very disjointed movie. And it's a bit of a disappointment because they bring in Shaw, and he is supposed to be, or sorry, I guess it's Deckard Shaw. I'm trying to remember this. I always get
This
them
one,
confused.
yeah, because this. Wait,
'Cause
yeah,
I think it was-
seven
yeah,
is the Jason Statham, so that's Deckard Shaw.
yeah. So they introduced Deckard Shaw, and he's supposed to be this just uber military secret ops dude that can take out a whole bunch of guards in a hospital, blow up buildings, and what have you. And then he's the big bad that everyone's supposed to go after. He nearly killed Toretto and Mia and Brian. Like, he's just, he's at this point he's killed Han. And as the film progresses, he kind of becomes like Wile E. Coyote. He just pops up. And the big bad turns out to be
Is that Djimon Hounsou?
Yeah, Djimon Hounsou's character, who's I just watched it last night, but his character is so bland that I cannot even remember his name right now.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'm blanking on it too.
And I've watched this film numerous times, but that shows you how, like, in the ranks of villains, he is nondescript. And I felt like,
oh boy, I don't even know how to pronounce the Jakande.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah, and his character, they're going after God's Eye, what have you, but he doesn't feel that much of a threat, even though he's got an army. And the whole time you're supposed to be worried about Deckard Shaw, but then Shaw doesn't feel like a big threat either. And then also, a lot of the stunts in this film don't quite make sense in terms of logistics. The fact that you have The Rock, who spends 90% of the film just kind of in a hospital bed.
Because he got beat up at the beginning, right? Because I remember that being my thing of like, oh, if the movie is like that, because he fights Shaw first, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, we're on to something with this. And then that's kind of the end of that. I remember being like, oh, I guess The Rock is sidelined.
Yeah, so, and that's a good point, because he's taking on Shaw, and through this battle where they're pretty much on par, he gets injured, he's in the hospital. I know Toretto and Hobbs are supposed to be quote unquote equals, but by the end of this film, it's like Toretto's the only one that can stop Shaw, and how they do it is by smashing their cars into each other for yet the second time, having this quote unquote street fight, which really makes no sense, because a man who took out an entire hospital should be able to take out Toretto, who isn't trained. He's just trained on the streets. And I mean, the street fighting and being street smart is great, but when you're going up against a military assassin who knows all forms of martial arts, it shouldn't be even a close battle.
I just want to step in here, because that's what I was thinking about what 9 was setting up, where like John Cena's like line in the movie is like that he's trained his whole life to beat his brother. I'm like, but like, why? His brother just drives cars.
Yeah.
Like, what is he training? Like, I feel like 1 year of training, you're better off than Toretto at that point.
And if you think about it, Toretto's best plan in the movie is to drive a car off a cliff and just reinforce that car. Like, you have this elaborate escape thing where they get a jump out of send the cars out of a plane, land them on this very secluded, tightly guarded road, all this action sequence, and then you cap it off by him just deciding to drive off a cliff. And there's a lot of cars flying, there's a lot of references to cars flying, and the first couple times it's amusing, the Dubai sequence is amusing, but by the end it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to see him try and hook something on a helicopter and all that silliness, and then Letty loving him back to life.
Yeah,
it's just a messy movie.
It is. I guess I was kind of blinded by specifically really liking Tony Jaa and some of the other like fight sequences they had. Not that it's that high up for me, but it's just more like I that kind of overrid some of the other stuff. that I didn't like about the movie.
And there are good, his sequences are good. Like I felt, because we knew that this was the one where Paul Walker had died as this film was, as it was being filmed. There's a couple of sequences, especially the staircase sequence towards the end, where I thought that this is where, if they were going to kill him off in the movie, this would be probably the sequence,
I
because
did
when you
have
see
that
them
feeling
going,
too.
when they go down the stairs, like they're jumping pretty high off of each platform, and I'm thinking someone's going to hit their head off of the, I guess, the upper part of the stair, and this is going to be it for his character. But
I was very, I I had that moment too with Anton Yelchin in Green Room, where I was like, oh, like I, it's kind of like you, not that he died making the movie, but it was like I knew he was dead when I watched the movie, so I was like, oh, like I
yeah,
hope he doesn't die in this movie too. Like it's too soon for me, and that was how I felt with Paul Walker's stuff in Fast Seven. It was or Furious Seven. I was just like, oh, like please just don't kill him, please. I don't think I can handle that.
and what do you have for number 6?
It's a good question. I just navigated away. Number 6 is Tokyo Drift.
Ah, okay, I have it higher, but all right.
I it's the yeah. I think what I like about it is all the stuff related to Han because I'm such a fan of Han, and maybe it's just like I just watched it, but like because it starts rough for me. I'm not a, and I think I what Lucas Black was in Friday Night Lights the movie, and I feel like I really liked him in that, but I guess I've never seen him like be good again, and this movie didn't help either. I was like, oh, like I can see they're trying to replace Paul Walker. Like, there's even certain ways he's shot where he looks like Paul Walker, but like, it's not working for me. And I couldn't, I don't, I couldn't get over the fact that like he's supposed to be 17, and I was like, these movies aren't necessarily for kids, so they didn't need to have that element to it. And it just that's kind of what slowed me down. Was I was like, I like the kind of Karate Kid element of like going somewhere else and like trying to like rebuild and go back at the bully, but other than that, I just couldn't get over the Lucas Black of it all. And then at the end, when Vin Diesel shows up, I'm like, wait, does he know Han is dead? Because he's smiling, and I get that for the audience, it's supposed to be like, look, he's back. But I was like, but shouldn't he be more upset in this moment or like asking questions? And anyway, the good thing is I really like Han. It's a Han centric movie for the most part, and that kind of gets it over the hump for me.
Yeah, and I'll go into what I like about it a bit more when we get to it. But I will say, in terms of the Diesel coming back part, I guess we just have to we also have to keep in mind that it was made before the other ones. So
Yeah, it was made before they, I guess, I'm assuming before they knew for sure they would try and tie it in the way they did.
oh yeah, and I think this one probably, if I remember correctly, it made the least amount of money out of all of them, but it was also the one where it had the smallest budget. They were just trying
Yeah.
to see if they could extend the franchise, and they gave it to Lin, and I like what he does with it, but yeah, at this point it was just more of a kind of, it was supposed to be the official send off, with just bringing him back as a kind of, the torch has been passed, we're never going to do these again, what have you.
Yeah, I got that sense, and I needed to keep that in mind. Like, well, I guess that is what I was doing while I was watching because it's funnily enough the last one I've seen out of all of them, and I'm kind of like, all right, I just have to remember how this actually fits in. And I guess I was trying to be like, all right, how did they leave themselves room to even do that? Which they did. It was just I think just the Vin Diesel part. I was like, I wonder how much he knows in this scene as a character.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's definitely, I think, probably the most divisive out of all of them.
Yeah.
There's camps that you really love it, some kind of appreciate it, and then there's those who just absolutely hate it.
Before I watched it, most of the people online that not that I know them, but just some of the other like movie pundits that I follow were kind of saying like it was their favorite, like two or three of them, and I was just like, oh, it's probably not bad then. And I was like, I had to, you saying that it had the lowest budget makes sense as well, because even the like opening credits, I was like, is this doesn't even feel like how these movies work. It felt a bit cheaper and not as committed as even the first two that I don't even really like were.
Well, I think it's at least a good segue for my number five, because my number five is the first one,
Okay.
which I know it's lower down on your list, but this was the one that got me hooked into the franchise. And it's funny. I know it's essentially Point Break, but with
Right.
cars. But in an odd way, I always kind of thought Point Break was overhyped, and then my love for this film made me appreciate Point Break even more. Very odd, I guess, circular pattern with it, but I really like the bond between Toretto and Brian in this one. I liked the cast of characters in it. I like the idea of these street racers, the street gang, somehow getting enough high tech equipment to be bandits at night. They never explain how they get some of the high tech gear that they have, but who cares? And I like the fact that you get a character like Letty, who is tough, can hang, but you also get Mia, who can easily drive cars as well. There's enough good dynamics that I could buy this undercover cop being swayed by this interesting cast of characters. And their biggest worry is not necessarily getting caught for their crimes, but this rival street gang who doesn't like to be embarrassed. And like, I don't know, it all works for me. And it probably shouldn't, but
No, I don't. I think most people who like the movies all probably put. That's why I was saying people would kill me for where I placed it, because I feel like if you're in for these movies, it's probably because the first one works so well for you. Um, and I think you're right about all the different people working to kind of win Brian over. I just guess I got hung up on the Paul Walker performance, but maybe I should just rewatch it and with fresh eyes.
and it has some of the, I'd say, the best lines in the franchise. Like, dude, I almost had you, you had me, you didn't even have your car, live my life quarter mile at a time, what have
Yeah.
you. There's a lot of interesting aspects to it. There's the minor character who's the tech guy, and he's got ADD and or ADHD, and he just there's enough interesting, unique characters in it that I'm willing to go with. And I would say that there's kind of two types of people. If you like Fast and Furious, there's two types. There's the type that like it from the first one, or there's the type that jump in at the fifth one. Because I think the fifth one is what really brings in a lot of people who didn't bother with the earlier ones.
Yeah.
And I'm just of the earlier camp, but I still understand why people wouldn't dislike this film.
Yeah, you're making me feel bad about where I placed it.
No, it's to each their own. Like I know there's people who, for example, love four, Fast and Furious, and
Interesting.
I
I
put
thought
it
that
a
would be
lot lower. Like there's the stuff that I put lower down on mine that I know people think are great. So that's what I love about this franchise. You can walk away and everyone has their own favorites, and you
yeah.
can pretty much argue for it. I mean, number two is probably the toughest to justify, but as you said, Singleton does what he can with it, and it's still entertaining for what it is.
Yeah, I like the franchise for exactly what you said, that you can kind of different people can latch onto different things, and there's no real wrong answer here. It's some of them are a bit more serious than others, but overall, it's the same kind of enjoyment you'll get out of it. So that was, wait, yeah, that was your five. What's my number five is Fate of the Furious. Like we talked about it when you talked about it. I think, and we have a podcast episode 44, number 44. We did Fate of the Furious. So I think my big thing was how are they going to brainwash Dom, and when it was revealed what was making him go against the team, I was like, yeah, that works for me. he does say he cares about family, and this is a new thing for him. So I like that, but everything you said that didn't work is what I would say as well. The only reason it's so high up for me is because I kind of like that approach of the person you would think would never go against the family is going against the family, and it's not like a chip in his brain. It's not anything like that. I kind of liked watching the scenes where he kind of struggled with it a bit. It wasn't a lot, but I thought that was an interesting layer they put on there. That this was something he was doing because he had to, and not because someone like physically rearranged his brain or something like that.
Yeah, and I will say that, the things I do like about it, I do like Charlize Theron as the villain, and I like the idea that she has a organization that is far-reaching. I feel like this franchise, for the most part, has, I guess you could say, similar to the Marvel universe, has had problems with villains and really
Yep.
making them interesting. And I would have loved to have seen her do a little more. Like, I love the scene with Deckard Shaw saving the baby.
Yeah, that was definitely a highlight for me.
The fact that they turned Owen Shaw into kind of like the bumbling brother of the Shaw family wasn't a big fan of. I did like the opening. I don't know if I can't remember if it's the opening, but the fight sequence where Hobbs and Shaw break out of jail. Like, there's a lot of good moments in it, and it probably has, I think, one of my favorite Roman moments when he's in the it's like the Lamborghini or something, and it gets
on the ice.
Yeah, it gets pulled under the ice, and then you have that Bond moment where he's holding onto the door as it gets pulled out, and all the like, it's, for some reason, that brings a smile to my face every single time. So there are moments to it that I enjoy. I just felt that, again, putting all the focus on Toretto kind of hinders things a bit for me.
That's fair, and I guess a lot of people, not that they fully committed, but just the idea that, like, obviously they were positioning Deckard Shaw as someone to root for now is problematic, given the fact that he killed Han.
Yeah, they have to figure out. I'm interested to see how they're going to rectify this.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some time. I'm wondering if they're even going to touch. I mean, they obviously can't do anything right now, but if things go back to, or some version of normal, if they're going to try and touch things up, or if they already know, like, they've got the right story and everyone will be on board with what they do in 9. Because I was genuinely surprised to even see Charlize Theron come back for number 9. Because, as you said, like, it would have been nice to see her do more. And I'm like, oh, did they know they were bringing her back again? Or, like, because, like, I guess we're going to see more of Cypher.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that in one of these films we actually get to see Helen Mirren drive a car.
Because I remember that, I'm sure she was joking around, but that's what she said she wanted to be in the franchise for, was to drive a car.
Yeah, apparently she's like a big car buff.
Yeah.
She wants to be in the action. I don't know if it's just because of, like, insurance or whatever they were afraid to, but I'm like, there's no reason why she shouldn't be behind the wheels.
I was waiting for her, like, the whole movie. I was like, oh, when is she going to get in the car? Like, I thought that's how they got her, was the promise of getting in a car. Well, that was our 5, right?
Yeah, that's 5. So
right.
for me, for number 4, we're going to keep with the Shaw clan, and I'm going Hobbs and Shaw, the spin-off franchise, where Hobbs and Deckard Shaw are now teaming up and essentially forming their own elite team of, I guess, interesting cast of characters, if you will, to take on the world. This one, I'll admit, from a plot standpoint, it's not necessarily the best, but I like the ideas that they are introducing. Like, I like the fact that there's a shadowy organization, and initially I thought that the mysterious voice behind this organization was going to be Han.
I had that feeling. I can't remember. So we did an episode on this earlier. It's episode 91. We also were kind of scratching our brain, like, who is this voice? Like, who is it going to be? It doesn't seem like it's going to be Han, but I was going to be like, also, it should be noted that this is also my number 4. I thought very fun. It shouldn't be a factor, but I did like the cameos, especially since I didn't know they were coming. They were pretty surprising. I was like, oh, and they're really like using them. It's not just like a one scene and done. We're really sticking with Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart throughout this movie. And it's like I like that they kind of have a world to keep building in outside of the Fast and Furious franchise.
Yeah, and I believe Chris Morgan has written like every single film, and I think what this film does right is it takes a lot of the best elements from the previous films, and the climax from this one is literally a ripoff of another film, but they at least understand that you need to have more than one person to take these individuals down, and the series was already going the kind of cartoony superhero route.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just make a villain that's essentially a super villain, and I can't tell you, I still don't understand the logistics of Brixton's motorcycle.
I don't either, and
I have
apparently
fun.
he didn't get it either. Idris Elba was like, I don't know. Who cares?
I have fun watching every scene that it's in, and just the crazy relentless action that happens in certain sequences. I feel like probably the best part of this film is actually Deckard's sister.
She is the best part, but I might be wrong, but I think I said it during our episode as well. It was very awkward that she never talks to another woman throughout that whole movie. And there is a scene where she's sitting right next to her mom, and I'm like, they really just, that Bechdel test, they just did not care at all. I was like, that is a weird thing for like what at this point is the most recent film in this franchise. Is like it's not like there was no opportunity for her to talk to any other woman. She's in the room with them, and it's kind of like, no, all the talking goes through either Shaw or Hobbs.
Yeah, and I like that they also, I mean, with her character, she gets a lot of great action sequences. They also put the breadcrumbs for like bringing romance back to the franchise.
Yes.
Which is, I think, in the ones that I think work well, they're the ones that find the nice balance of romance, humor, action, what have you. Does this one run a bit long? Yeah,
yes.
But I like, as I said, you mentioned the cameos, and I like the fact that those guys are going to be part of the team moving forward. And
yes,
if you're going to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, rub it in Vin Diesel and Tyrese Gibson's face and say, okay, you've got your family, your quote unquote team. Here's who we're bringing. Like, I could easily see this being the new franchise that after Fast 10, kind of takes over. And I wouldn't be surprised if this franchise ends up down the line making even more money, because that's a powerhouse cast that you have.
Yep. It definitely worked for me. I am a sucker for cameos, but like this one, I was like, oh, I like the initial shock of like, oh, look who it is. But then, like as you said, like it feels like they could be part of the team. It's like, okay, well, I mean, they've got a plan for them. This wasn't just like for shock value. And I had something else to say, but yeah, oh yeah, the pacing, that was my big thing, because I usually, because as someone who loves The Irishman and Endgame, like I don't care how long the movie is, but if you're making me like aware of how much time I'm spending, then that's the problem. And I think that's kind of one of the downsides of this movie is there's a lot of fun, but I still feel like, oh boy, like we still have more to go. Like,
yeah,
this is not done yet.
I'll jump to my number 3, if that's all right. So, because I think we're going to start to overlap and have discussions. But for me, my number 3 is Tokyo Drift.
Okay.
Yes, I'm one of those people that puts Tokyo Drift really up there. I really like this one. I think this is actually, from a overall character building standpoint and story standpoint, probably the best in terms of story. It's a very simple tale because of the budget. And as you made the reference to The Karate Kid, which is something I didn't even think about numerous times that I've seen it, it's like, yeah, it is essentially the Karate Kid story,
Yes,
but I like that you have Han as Mr. Miyagi, and it's interesting that I thought this film works well on its own, just as an individual film,
it definitely
and
does.
but when you even retrofit it, it I think it plays even better because Han is just this great character, a guy who is essentially partnering with the son of this head criminal of the criminal underworld, and he's just kind of like, nah, it's none of this impresses me. The cars, I like the girls because hey, I like the
Right.
girls, but he's more about I care about people who are of good character, who show their mettle that will be with you to the end if need be, right? And that's why he's able to take this young kid under his wing. When you think of it in the context of the greater franchise, you're thinking, well, Han's like a millionaire. He's
Yeah.
he's teaming up with this guy, the DK, the Drift King.
I was so happy when they're like, "Do you know what DK stands for?" He's like, Donkey Kong. I really did like that.
And there's
He's the
just a
drift
lot of
killer, and he's like, "What drift?"
yeah, man. The Drift King is something real, and what I love about that too is when you first see what drifting actually is, and they open the elevator, and you see these cars just gliding by, and you're like, this guy, he's done. He doesn't know what he's getting into, and I don't know, it works. Like him being melancholy because of Giselle's death works in the retrofitted version, or you could just look at it as him being kind of bored with the way life is and he's just kind of killing time, and
I
I don't
did
know.
like, I did like that they kind of. I mean, who knows what Justin Lin had in mind? I don't know how much control he has over the scripts, but like the idea that like as someone who knows what happens technically before this movie, but later in the franchise, like I was like, yeah, I mean, they really do give you room to believe that he could still be mourning the death of Gal Gadot or something like that. Like, I mean, not still actively, but still kind of like a bit removed because he had a big loss or whatever, and he had to run away. As he said, like, you ever see those movies where they have to go south of the border? This is my Mexico. So, like, I did appreciate that they gave themselves that room to have me still, as someone who's watching this after the fact, be like, this still fits. They didn't shoot themselves in the foot. And as I said, I really like Han, so I was happy to spend the time with him.
Yeah, and it's a smart move also on Justin Lin because I mean the character of Han, I guess, is first introduced in Better Luck Tomorrow, and he kind of retrofits it a bit to fit
Yeah,
this.
I'd heard that. Is it supposed? It is supposed to be the same character.
Yes, if I remember correctly, it's supposed to be the same character,
Wow.
but just not officially tied to that film, but it's the same actor, same name, a lot of the same kind of mannerisms, but just like a later version. I know Tarantino used to do that a lot when he first started, like with the Vic Vegas and Vincent
Yes.
Vegas, and
Yeah.
kind of loosely tying together. But this film takes the series global, which up until like, the first two didn't do that. They were all like, "Oh, we're gonna do L.A., we're gonna do Miami," and Justin Lin's like, "Why don't we just go Tokyo?" Completely
Yep.
different country. And from there, it kind of gave the gateway for everything else that came after, or at least it was made after it, to just travel the world. And it opened up a realm of possibilities. And I don't know, I think it's like the racing. This is one of the few films where I find the racing really engaging. And again, it ends up
Yep.
with the climax is this giant race down a hill, and
And
it's
I cared
still
about it.
yeah, you cared about it, how all the people with the cameras filming it, like how they orchestrated it for the budget, and then the part where Han dies also, that's just a really great action race sequence as well.
Like,
Like,
even though I knew it was coming, I was still like, oh my goodness, they just killed Han.
mhm.
Because like I've seen a version of that at the end of another movie, but like I was, it's, I mean, it is effective, and I especially, a moment I really liked. It's not really a big deal, but like when they're kind of like partly drifting, and he's driving with the girlfriend. I can't remember her name now. I feel bad, but the that kind of trope he had of trying to hit on other people's girlfriends or like women who are otherwise engaged, but like she's driving him up the hill and kind of telling him a story, and you can kind of see that she's able to kind of drift the car as well. I just like that moment. It was a nice like downbeat for the movie that helped you care about when they kind of go at it at the end of the movie.
Yeah, Neela's one of those characters that gets, I guess, pushed to the sidelines because she is the girl, the trophy that everyone's fighting over for. But the fact that, she, again, there's a lot to show agency. Like, how come I've never seen you drift? Well, you've never asked, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I can do all this. She has to deal with racism, being mixed, and how her life is, and then being tied to this guy who's in the criminal underworld, and there's a lot of interesting ideas that happens in this film. And I think this is probably the only time, maybe outside of the first one, where the series actually addresses the issue of race and discrimination.
Yeah, because I did like the idea that she was kind of like, because he's like, yeah, you were born here though, and she's like, well, outsider can mean many different things, and I'm like, well, I like that they're kind of getting into that. As you said, like, it's not because it's everyone just is who they are in the other movies. They don't really spend time on that, but this movie did give an opportunity to be like, we're in a different country, so there's going to be culture shock, and also just the idea of other. And I like that they normalized as much as possible the stuff that was happening in Tokyo. So it made, is his name Sean in the movie? I can't remember, but the Lucas Black character, they made him kind of like the odd one or the weird one.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I've got a lot of nice things to say for this movie that wasn't in my top 3.
A couple of rewatches, it'll move up there. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. I believe you. My number 3 is Furious 7. I think what will probably happen is I'll watch them in order again. But my last memory was, as I said, like I liked the martial artists that were in the movie, so the fight stuff was fun for me. I thought they did. I mean, they kind of overplayed their hand, but they did nail the like landing of Paul Walker can't be in these movies anymore. So I just thought it was a successful thing, and it did keep the same energy out of when I saw it, like of the momentum that they had going from the other movies that I liked. So I don't really have anything more positive to say other than the action worked for me. I thought that they were able to handle Brian leaving the franchise in a way that felt comfortable to me, other than that last scene where they're kind of driving off, and I'm like, I mean, you could still see him in this universe. You just can't do missions with him. But I understood this was, again, something they were doing for the audience and less for the actual story in the movie.
Yeah, that one thing I didn't mention, but to just piggyback off of your point, this is one of the few films where you could stop the last 20 minutes and just have a video tribute to one of the stars, and I'm like, yep, I'll buy it. I still get a little misty every time I hear the music come in, and I've heard that song, I don't know, 1,000 times on the radio. It might be on my iPod, I'm just saying. Exactly. But I still get a little touch every single time. And then when that car drives off into like the sun, and you're like, oh man, he's driving off to heaven. Like, it gets me. Yeah,
I feel like they did a good job. It was something I was kind of like, yeah, who knows? Well, like, I don't think they're going to be able to do as well. I was also prepared for them to actually kill him off, but what they ended up doing was good, and maybe I give it more points than it deserves for that.
If I've been keeping track correctly, I think we're going to have
I hope we have the same 2 and 1.
Well, we definitely have, we're down. I think we have the same top 2.
We have the same top 2, just the order. I'm hoping it's the same order.
So I'm going to say, and I know it's going to probably shock a lot of people, because for most people, this is their number 1. But my number 2 is Fast 5.
Oh, yep, that was my number 1. So,
yep.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I could be convinced that number 6 is the superior film. I guess I'm giving whatever. Well, I'll say what I have to say about 5. But I love 6, and for the longest time, I didn't know which one I liked more.
I'll say that they're both great action films. Not
Yes.
just great films for this franchise, but they're both great action films. And I will say that this one has a bit more. Well, I won't even say. I was going to say the stunts are a bit more realistic, but then you've got a whole safe crashing through a city and no one getting hurt. I just think that 5 works because you've got the cast now. It's when they officially kind of become uh, Uber team,
Yeah.
globetrotting kind of heist team, soon to maybe become Bondish espionage team, what
Yep.
have you. But they throw the rules out the window. They're, as I said, you're in Brazil. They're traveling the globe. You have Hobbs coming in as the toughest nails agent that's going to bring them down. And then you've also got this drug kingpin who literally has most of Brazil under his wing. And the point, that they're trying to evade Hobbs and his team while dealing with this cocky drug dealer, politician, what have you. There's a lot that works. And by time Hobbs joins them, Hobbs and Elena join their side, it's earned. Like
Mhm.
you feel, like you understand why Elena would be drawn to Toretto. Um, them realizing that these guys are criminals, but they're not as bad as these other bad guys. And the action sequences, all of them, from like the opening train escape, train heist
Yeah.
thing, and again when physics go out the window, it all plays so well.
I think my big thing about 5 that I really liked is what you said. That it's the introduction of them more as like a heist team and espionage is later, but it, for me that gives me a chance. Maybe it's just because I'm not great with following stories, but like gives me a chance to be like, oh, that's the codes guy, that's the this person, that's the and like I feel like more so than in the other movies, because that's always been the case. There's always like a this person for this specific function. But even in stuff like Tokyo Drift, like they kind of are like it's just there and you don't really dig in. Whereas I feel like in these 5 and 6 movies, you can dig, and even 7 and 8, but to less success is like you can kind of dig in with those characters as they do what they're there to do, and you can kind of it gives them like a scene to shine, and then I can be like, yeah, nice. The team is all firing on all pistons or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I just have a lot of great things to say about 5. But the big thing was in the trailer when you see The Rock versus Vin Diesel. I'm like, why didn't I realize this is what I wanted the whole time? Like, of course, I want to see those two guys like go after each other. Like, this is perfect. Their fight scene did not disappoint, and as you said, like almost every action set piece, I was like, this is just thorough entertainment. Like they know what they're doing. I'm in good hands. I'm enjoying myself.
Do you want to then
Oh well, yeah,
quickly touch on 6, and then you can just
yeah,
elaborate
yeah.
more on that? Because 5 is definitely the one that most people love.
So 6, I mean, realistically, I felt like they just successfully kept going with the momentum of 5, but it was like, and again, it was the scene in the trailer where like now The Rock and Vin Diesel are tagged, or not even tag teaming, but they're like fighting 2 other big guys, and I was like, yeah, I also want this. Like these movies just know what I want before I can vocalize it, and like there's I can't even remember what they're fighting in, like a container or a storage container or something like that, and it's like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. And I can't remember. No, they don't introduce Missandei from Game of Thrones until 7, right? Yeah, because she's the one that gets kidnapped. But I feel like they've got everyone on the team. Giselle dies, but you're kind of like, this is it. It feels like a nice ending for some of the characters, whereas for me, I guess I put 5 above because it's a nice, like, it feels like a new fresh breath of air. I don't know how to describe it any other way.
No, that's good. As I said, 5 is the one that really brings most people into the franchise. The reason I put 6 as my personal favorite, I understand. I'm gonna get this out of the way right now. I understand that it's an epic runway
Oh
for
yeah,
the
people have a
climax.
problem with that.
I
Yeah.
understand it's a big play, and I think in number 7 there's a part where Roman talks about how he shot a plane that was as big as a planet out of the air. Uh, I get that the tank sequence
Hmm.
with Diesel jumping from one highway to the other and grabbing Letty midair. I understand all of that is ridiculous, and I love every minute of it. And I will tell you that one of the things that I love about this particular film is everyone has something to do.
Hmm.
There's great fight sequences on top of those outlandish action sequences, and they're faced with a foe that is essentially equal to them. So when you have the fight with Letty and Gina Carano's character Riley, that's just a great fight sequence
Yep.
in the train station. And at that point, Riley's on the good guy side, and she doesn't. I guess it's a draw, but doesn't she's unable to capture Letty. But while that fight's going on, you also have another fight with Han and Roman
One of my favorite
and one
fights.
of the guys from the raid, and they're getting whooped. Right? Like
I love
at
it.
no
Yeah.
point, they do a lot of great things in this film, but you also are reminded that these are just average people who are kind of fearless, but they're not great at everything,
And
and
yeah,
they're
and I
going to get
especially like that Han
outsmarted.
couldn't fight. That they weren't trying to be like, oh, but he knows some martial art that will get them out of this. Like he's
Yeah,
like, oh, like we're in the same boat here. Like we're getting our ass kicked.
getting her kicked, or like, don't tell anybody, let's not bring that out. Owen Shaw, he's an all right villain. I mean, like, I like the idea that him being a step ahead of everyone because he's got a mole on
Hmm.
the inside that they don't know about. The whole fact that his team is essentially a doppelganger of Toretto's
Yes.
team,
Yeah.
complete with a guy that looks like Toretto at the beginning. There's just so much that works in this film. And then when Giselle dies, you actually feel something because for, I guess, 5 they kind of hint at it, but 6 you really get the sense that Giselle and Han are a couple. They start off
Hmm.
in, I forget which country they're in at the very beginning, but they talk about going to Tokyo and kind of settling down. And there's a couple of times in the film where she saves him, in
Yeah.
that big highway sequence. And then even when she dies, she's able to save him one last time. It's so when they're all celebrating at the end, and then Mia asks, like, well, where's Giselle? Like, you really feel those moments. So I
I
just,
definitely felt it.
yeah, it just works, and they still find a way to add humor into it, like the sequence I think it's this one where they steal the cars. Was it this one or number 5? I'm trying to remember now, where they had the race and Toretto let him win. Oh, I might be
I don't think
thinking
that.
it might be 5. I'm getting all the race sequences filled up, but either way, there's a lot of great moments in 6. So I understand the love for 5, and I appreciate it as well. It's close second, but 6 is the one that I I think I've watched the most out of all of them.
Um, yeah, I can't say you're wrong for picking six. I wasn't gonna say you were wrong anyway, but like as I said, 5 and 6 go back and forth, and I think I just went 5 today because it was like this was the one that made me be like I should get back into these movies, and yeah, because I'd watched all of them up until 5, other than Tokyo Drift, and I was kind of like, oh, like were they always this good? And like, because it was like I genuinely like them, and yeah, it's not like an oh I like these movies ironically thing. Like I just genuinely enjoy when I'm watching these movies. I feel like they really know how to have fun and entertain, and yeah, definitely movies to see on the big screen with a crowd.
Yeah, it's a good balance. So, like, I mean, my top 3 are all Justin Lin films, but there's definitely a difference in his filmmaking and what the other directors great.
I would agree. I was glad. Wait, he did come back for 9, right?
Yeah, he came back for 9.
Yeah,
So
I was really looking forward to 9 because I definitely, I like you. I'm a big Justin Lin fan, and I think you're right about Paul Walker being an important part. But for me, especially, Justin Lin is what makes these movies work.
yeah, he definitely understands how to do over the top action, but then he also brings a nice level of humor into the film. And you could argue that some of it's the screenwriting, but I don't know. I feel like with his direction, he makes everything feel a little more effortless.
Yes.
And you compare it to someone like James Wan, who I felt one of the problems with Seven is that it's very gratuitous. Like the race scenes, there's the shots of the girls' butts, and the girls are wearing very little clothing to begin with. F. Gary Gray has good ideas, but he relies so much on the action that he kind of loses sight of the characters. And I feel when Singleton made his, it was more like the film franchise was still kind of grounded. So outside of that great sequence where the cops are chasing them and you got all these high-end cars breaking out of the garage, he doesn't really get to do too much from an action standpoint, right? So
his hands are tied in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I had a great time talking about these movies with you. I'm glad we could find the time to do that. And I guess now is the time that I would say I'll let you kind of plug your stuff, because I feel like you've got some stuff going on and people should be aware of what you're doing.
Oh, well, I think you did a good job at the beginning.
Okay.
Just highlighting the stuff. But yeah, I do write for That Shelf on occasion, Cinema Axis, contributing the seats. On That Shelf, you can listen to my podcast, Changing Reels, which is a bi-weekly show that talks about diversity and representation in cinema. Usually kind of underappreciated or lesser known films, but Daniel's going to be on, I guess, the next episode, which I think drops a week after this episode, maybe. I'm not sure how I'm
still trying to figure out what schedule this will be on, but it might be out like a day or two before my episode on your show. All
right. Well, either way, at the end of April, I think it's going to be the 29th is when Daniel will be on to talk about Dear White People. And the most recent episode is out now on all the various platforms, or you can stream it on That Shelf. And we talked about Hausu.
Yes.
The wild Japanese horror comedy that up until I think last November I had not seen. So
I still haven't seen it yet. My plan is for all of your episodes is to watch the movie, then listen to your episode.
Mm-hmm. I definitely recommend watching. It's a wild film.
I will definitely get into it. I definitely have the time now to just kind of relax and watch movies.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. As you said, we're actually both on That Shelf. There's other great podcasts like yours, Changing Reels, Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, No Budget Nightmare, Composers. There's a whole bunch of podcasts, so people should go there and listen. I have a website, tdfeverything.com. You can hear backlog episodes of Spoiled Rotten at tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. And you can find social media coordinates and all that there. And please rate, review, and subscribe on all the different podcatchers like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. It's there. Thank you very much for doing this, Courtney. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, and all the best to your viewers, and hopefully everyone's doing well. I know it's strange times, but we're going to get through it.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.